chronically Caucasian vocal analyst, and today we'll be listening to some Lara Fabian. Yeah, buddy.
I hear your voice in the wind.
I feel like I need to point this out. This is something that is very, 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 very common with 90s arrangements. You have the electric guitar, right? Yeah, so you got the electric guitar. The bass is super punchy and pronounced. Right? And then on top of that, we're having this like very, very power ballady Celine Dion-esque melody going on. So this is a very, very, very sparse kind of setup. And it gives the singer a lot of room to do really neat things. And this is going to be paying attention to her phrasing and how emotive and how musical and how interesting it is. All right, so let's really look into this phrasing right here.
I don't know where to find you.
This right here, this descent into breathiness is really, really nice.
I don't know where to find you.
And it comes off of a glottal, which is the I. She really gives a lot of emphasis on this I. Right? It starts and gets a little grit there. Right? And so this elegant descent into this breathy low. She raises her larynx a little bit to get even more gentle with this phrasing.
I feel you under my skin.
And it's so smooth. Her phrasing is so buttery smooth. The legato is brilliant. It's really nice. And I want to take account, though, the consonants. So a lot of people, they throw out this exercise. They don't want to do this exercise. They think it's for amateurs, right? Right? But what they don't get about that exercise is that it trains you to have your breath consistent. It gives you a physical, a kinesthetic, and a visual cue, if you're doing it with a mirror, of how your breath might be a little bit inconsistent. Right? It can change intensity. So that's a really good cue. And one of the things that she's doing, and that's how she gets her phrasing buttery smooth, but then also listen to how she will adjust to these consonants.
I feel you under my skin.
That K is super percussive. She makes it right on time. A lot of singers, when they do a legato, they get self-indulgent. They won't be on time. She is. This is a really, really good lesson for anybody who's trying to make more musical phrases. This is a great example of that. That's really interesting right here. This vowel modification stuff is usually reserved for when you go higher, it's not often used on a vowel. She just totally changed the vowel here. Embrace became embrace, right? And and the reason why, like the justification for doing that, is it ties off the phrase really, really, really well. It's like a filter, right? It's another way to decrescendo. We often talk about, crescendo diminuendo as far as singing technique goes, and that's of course important, but we don't talk about it a lot in the context of using a microphone, right? Let's take a look. So what's going on right here is we have these are the frequencies when I'm having bright vowels, right? Now all of a sudden, this sort of transitions, right? So we're seeing gradually that certain frequencies are disappearing, right? Right around here onwards, we don't have as many frequencies, right? And then we get to here, where we're pretty much dry, right? And this is just an exhale. This is not important, or it's an S or something. I think it's the embrace, right, which gives it the higher frequencies right there. But it's not part of the vowel. And you can also see, as a result of just these frequencies, you're seeing a decrescendo, right? This is the waveform. The more the waveform is, like, the smaller the waveform is, the less loud it is. And you might think, well, aren't you just decrescendoing? And it's like, not entirely. Look at this. This is the lowest note here. This is the fundamental, right? Notice how that doesn't change. On a spectrogram, which is what this is, the brighter the color, the louder that frequency. And you can see that this does not change. Even if it does, it's imperceptible, right? And so all of this decrescendo is happening just from a vowel change. So I think that's pretty cool. Her consonants are incredible. Her use of consonants to get on that downbeat and make it more rhythmically significant is not something that is done enough. Let's take a listen to that moment here. All of that stuff is exactly on time. And that's something you should really challenge yourself with. You should take a metronome. There's a piano that plays. Yeah, that's simply gorgeous. This is really, really cool right here, what she's doing. What she's doing right here is she's coming in and out of belt, right? We talked about, like, one way that we can decrescendo by changing vowels. Well, now we're doing it with using we're using the larynx in many different ways. Let's get into this. This is really cool. I want to hear it again first, though. There we go. Yeah, this is a bunch of phrases where she's doing it right now. And that's so cool. We have to do this. We have to talk about it. Okay, belting isn't exactly something I'm good at. I took a little practice runs here, so this is what belting looks like on the spectrogram. How to reach me. Okay, so what did I do here? What I did here, there, okay. What I did here was this is what a belt looks like. This is why belts are loud. Unlike classical singing, you can see that there's a really, really wide spread. In classical singing, it's almost always a little bit more closer together. So what's happening is that you have this fundamental, and then the entire overtone series of that fundamental gets repeated. And then on top of that, you're in a frequency range. The human ear is tuned to this frequency range. Let me move the thingamabob so you can see this. There we go. So that's right around 3 kilohertz. That is where the human ear is tuned. That will be perceived as louder. So you have a combination of things when it comes to belting. When it comes to belting, all right, you have a tremendous amount of volume. What causes this to happen is, first of all, there's a little contraction of what's called the areoepiglottic sphincter to get this focus in this frequency range. That's used, it's called twang, is another way to put it. The reason why this is so loud is that when you tilt your cricoid cartilage, what that does is it fattens and shortens the folds. Okay? So as pressure builds up, like normally your pressure builds up and, you know, we're a little gentle, right? right? That's when your folds are longer and thinned out. This is what happens when you belt. So because it's thick, a lot of pressure builds up. It's also one of the reasons why you can get injured. It's remarkable how little breath you need for belting. It's remarkable. I actually exhaled entirely before I did this. And then, of course, we get into the decrescendo. Notice how I'm still highlighting here. We still have this, but it's just simply put not as strong. This is tilting in a classical singing manner, right? So that's the Adam's apple. The thyroid cartilage is tilting this way, and that stretches out the folds. Now, that is definitely something that will add volume if you're not doing anything else, right? Let's take a look at that because it's fun. So if I go no tilt at all, right? And then that's when we get the opera effect, right? So that is what she's doing. She's using those three positions of the larynx, the cricoid tilt for belt, the thyroid tilt for the vibrato and the sumptuous color that it tends to bring, and a neutral larynx to make it really light and feathery. And she's doing this dynamically depending on where she is in the phrase, and it's like larynx Olympics over here. It's really, really cool. This is more of the same. Actually, we're seeing a combination of the two things we already talked about. So let's take a look at this one. That's belt, but in a more mid-range. Someone's compensating for something. What we have is less of a belt. So what we have to understand is that, you know, if the thyroid cartilage is tilting or the cricoid cartilage is tilting, these things have a range of motion. You don't have to get the biggest. I mean, to get the biggest sound possible, yeah, you contract your cricoid as much as you can. But for something like this, where she doesn't want to hit you over the head, she wants power, but she doesn't want to hit you over the head with it, right? And then goes to that thyroid tilt. That is intentional. And this goes back to what we were talking about with the neutral larynx. This is not a neutral larynx. This is a clever trick. So when you go up with a neutral larynx, there will be a time when your folds just flip, because nothing is making them go together and nothing is stretching them out like the two tilts would accomplish. So if I go, right, eventually it doesn't feel so good. So what she does here to compensate for that is she's actually tilting her thyroid cartilage a little bit. And then on top of that, she's raising her larynx, and then she's holding it in position. That is tension, but she does it once. She doesn't do it for too long, and she does it with very little air. It is okay if things are not 100% ideally ergonomic, as long as what you're accomplishing is done. The effect is done, and you're not too drained to continue, and you don't hurt yourself, right? Belt, this contrast is delicious. I love that. I love that. This contrast, this fragility and gentleness in contrast to power. It's wonderful. This is impressive for several reasons, okay? Not only is sustaining a belt tricky, but actually in the very start of this note, she had a little bit of a, I'm going to say hiccup, but it's not even really a hiccup. So when we belt, something happens. Something can very easily happen when we belt. Let's go back to the spectrogram. Okay, so what we have here, is some signs of belt that are not ideal. Okay, what I've circled here is just this little static, right? And what that does, once I can get my mouse there, okay, good. What that does is or what that means is that there's air leaking, right? So when you belt, and this folds are really fat here, what can happen is they're not coming together entirely, right? They're like a little bit, but they're not entirely, right? There's a little bit of air leakage, and that's what that is. Now, high fits was, everyone makes mistakes, right? You don't need to jump to Lara Fabian's defense, because what I'm about to say is something that I'm actually really impressed by her doing. High fits, when asked, one of the greatest violin players of all time, was asked the question, how are you so on pitch every single time? How do you do that? And his answer was, I don't. I'm just good at fixing it on the fly. And that's really what's being accomplished here. This breathiness is almost imperceptible at the start of this belt. You hear that, just the tiniest bit of air leaking here, and then she just fixes it. That's way harder than if you just hit the note right the first time and you're like, yeah, this is good. You have to understand what you're doing to make this correction on the fly. It's really, really hard to do. Nice. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. That's just straight up like classical singing when she gets up there. That's so cool. She always, every performance I see with Lara Fabian, she goes there. You know what I mean? It's super, super conviction, emotional. It's amazing. Holy crud.